Hello everybody, this is Dave again. I took a little time off and I'm back again. I've got another video here for you. Today we're going to look at the Roussea Gambit. This was a game, or an opening that was requested by a subscriber. He said he had played a game versus this opening and he would kind of like to see a video on it. So I tried to find some master games with this particular opening, and I was only able to find one game in which both players were masters, and I found another game which will be the first game we'll look at today, a 26-22 player versus an 1841 player. 2600 player would be white, and this was a correspondence game. The ECO code for this particular game is C40. Our themes will be the weakening of the king side pawn structure and attacking the exposed king. So let's get started. White plays E4, black responds E5, knight to F3, and F5. This is the Roussea Gambit. To tell you the truth, I've never played this against this opening in any of my games. It was kind of struck me as interesting, so that's why I went ahead and did some research and found these games, and I hope you enjoy these. The next game by white is bishop to C4, and white immediately takes control of the light squares, aiming here on the king side, especially the F7 square. Black plays knight to C6, normal developing move. White plays D3. Now black plays bishop to C5, and now white plays knight to G5, which adds pressure to the F7 square. Black plays knight to H6, defending the F7 square. And now white plays queen to H5, check. Black here doesn't have a whole lot of options, and he plays really the best move, which is king to F8. If he would have played G6, attacking the queen, of course, white would have just played queen takes H6. He's won a knight, and he still has a very strong attack on the king side. So it was not a good move. And of course black played the better move, which was king to F5. So let's go back. Oops. King to F5. Now white plays knight to F7, forking the queen and rook. Black I'll mess up. Black plays queen to E8, and now bishop takes H7 comes next. Black plays a very bad move. Of course, he's in a very bad position anyway, and he plays the move G takes H6. The better move would have been, instead of G takes H6, would have been rook to G8, just accepting the loss of material. Of course, the game would have then possibly continued with E takes F5 and B5. And white's material is decisive. He should be able to win this game very easily. But in the game, black played instead, after bishop takes H6, he played the recapture G takes H6, which allows white to win very easily in a very easily won position. Queen takes H6 check, king to E7, queen to G5, king to F8, and now queen to F6. And since I believe black realized he was going to be mated anyway, so he just made it easy on his opponent. He played queen takes F7, and the next move was queen takes F7, checkmate. Now I know this was a very quick game, but it just kind of shows you how a very strong player took advantage of black's mistakes. This was not a very good opening. It really exposed his king to an attack on the light squares. Now I'm going to show you another game. This next game is between two masters. The first player is Spazov. He's a 2598 game. The second player is Dimitrov. He's a 2404 player. This is a team championship game, and I believe it was played in Russia, but I'm not exactly positive. The themes will be the same: the weakening of the king side pawn structure and attacking the exposed king. The ECO code for this game is C50. So let's get started here. White plays E4, E5, knight to F3, knight to C6, bishop to C4, and then F5. Still the Roussea gambit. White plays D3, knight to F6, castles, bishop to C5, knight to C3, D6, bishop to E3, bishop to B6, and knight to G5, exposing the weakness of the F7 square. Once again, we see the same theme. White has his bishop and knight bearing down on the F7 square, making it impossible for the black king to castle. Of course, he can't castle because actually the black king would be traveling through this square, and he'd be in check. The next move by black is queen to E7, and now white plays bishop to F7 check. And this is the best move. Some players might think that maybe the move knight to F7 would be a better move, attacking the rook at H8, and that way preventing him from castling. But actually, the better move is bishop to F7. And let me kind of show you here. Next move would have been rook to F8. The knight retreats to G5, H6, knight to F3, F takes E4, D takes E4, and the game's pretty well even. And I think the game continuation will show quite clearly why bishop to F7 check is the better move. So let's go back to that particular move. Bishop to F7 check, and black plays king to F8. Now he cannot castle. And the other variation, black could have possibly, after developing his light squared bishop, castle queenside. But in this instance, after forcing with the check move, forcing the black king to move, he now is unable to move, or unable to castle. Now white retreats his bishop to B3, black plays H6, knight retreats to F3, F4, the pawn attacks the bishop, and the bishop decides to exchange here at B6, A takes B6, black captures with the pawn towards the center. And if you take a moment here, let's evaluate the position. The material is even, but white controls the diagonal on the light squares. The black king cannot castle. The H8 rook is out of play. He's going to have a very difficult time getting into the game. And if you notice in the prior variation that rook had moved to F8, making the rook playable in the game. He's got a good square to play at F8. Here the rook is kind of trapped in the corner. So if you can see, the white has a very nice advantage for those reasons. The next move in the game, white makes a mistake. And if you are evaluating this position, you kind of think of some of the rules of chess. Usually when you have your head in development, which white is, the black king is kind of stuck in the center there. He doesn't really have any good squares. The idea is to open up the center. So with this in mind, that's exactly what white did. He played the move D4. But before I look at this, let's look at what should have been the best continuation for white. And the idea of this continuation is that white will continue to take advantage of the light square weaknesses in black's position. And the best move in this position is knight to H4. And what he's doing is he's threatening the fork of the king and queen here at G6. Black would have to respond with queen to E8. Next move would be knight to B5. Here, this knight is now threatening the C7 pawn and forking rook and queen. Next is G5, attacking the knight at H4. White plays knight to C7, forking the rook and queen, as I said earlier. The queen moves to D8. White plays knight takes A8, and now black will play G takes H4. And white has a very good game. He's still controls the light squares in black's position. It might take a little bit of doing here, but of course this knight protects some very key squares at g4 and h5, but this white queen could, after some more exchanges, or in this instance maybe pushing this pawn forward, making the exchange, he could also enter the game on the light squares. But let's go back to the game. Oh, one more thing. Yeah, the idea here is, of course, to open up the center, and I got ahead of myself a little bit here. White would have prepared it with possible moves of c3 and rook to e1, pushing that d pawn and then opening up the center. I apologize for getting a little bit ahead of myself there. But let's go back to the game. Instead of playing the best move, knight to h4, White decided to open up the center. He made the move d4. And in principle this is a good move, but actually the knight to h4 was a much better move. The next move in the game was bishop to g4, d takes e5, opening up that center, d takes e5, knight to d5, knight takes d5, and here again White makes a slight inaccuracy. He plays the move e takes d5, where in effect the better variation would have been bishop takes d5, maybe bishop to h5, c3, and g6, and the game is equal. But in the game, White played e takes d5, and the only advantage here is that it exposes the backwards pawn at e5, where White could very easily build up some play against it with the rook to e1, and the queen can make such a maneuver such as this to build up the pressure against that pawn and relieving the pin on the knight at f3. So after White played e takes d5, Black drops his knight into d4. White plays king to h1, knight takes b3, c takes b3, and the only reason I believe that White captured away from the center is that he didn't want to exchange or allow Black to exchange the rooks along the a file, which I think would have been really better for White, because after a takes b3, and if you make this exchange, White then has a queen that can, could make check here, capture at b7, and disrupt the queenside pawn structure. Just one idea. But in the game, White decided to capture with a c pawn instead, and after that knight takes b3, he played c takes b3. Next is rook to d8, rook to e1, c6, and of course the better move would have been queen to d6, blocking that d pawn and still protecting the e5 pawn. But he played instead c6, and White played knight takes e5 with the idea of making some drastic exchanges here, which exactly is what follows. Bishop takes d1, knight to g6 check, forking the queen and king, king to f7, rook takes e7 with check, king takes g6, rook takes d1, c takes d5, and now king to g1. And I think the better move would have been, instead of king to g1, I know White's afraid of back rank mate and he wants to bring his king to the center, but instead of king to g1, the better move most probably would have been rook to e6, and the game could have possibly continued with king to g5, rook at d to e1, king to h5, and rook takes b6, and eventually White could very easily pick up the loose pawns at b7 and d5 and have a very strong advantage. He would possibly be up 2, maybe 3 pawns. But in the game, White chose king to g1 instead, rook to h to e8, and now this was White's final error. He should have played rook takes b7 and picked up those queenside pawns, but he thought he had a one endgame and he decided to go for it, and he played rook takes e8 instead. And after this, the game is pretty well a draw. I'll go through the moves, not with very much comment at all. After rook takes e8, king to f1, getting out of that back rank mate threat, rook to e5, rook to e1, king to f5, rook takes e5, king takes e5, king to e2. Now we're down to strictly a king and pawn ending. Both sides have 6 pawns. Both players have a double b pawn, and the biggest difference is that black has a passed d pawn, but he will be unable to push it forward. Next move is king to e4, f3 check, king to d4, king to d2, b5, king to e2, b4, and this is a very good move because it prevents White from pushing his a pawn forward and gaining any leverage there. The key for black after the move a3 is he does not exchange it. He just leaves the b pawn sit exactly where it's at. If White wants to capture it, it doesn't do him any good. So the next move was king to d2, getting the opposition, g5, king to e2, a lot of shuffling around now, h5, king to d2, g4, h3, g takes f3, g takes f3, h4, king to e2, king to c5, king to d3, king to c6, king to d4, and at this point it shows that White won the game. But all the computer analysis that I've been able to do in this position shows it a dead draw. So I assume, being at the 40th move, either one of two things happened. Why White won the game is that either black lost on time, which I have no record of that, or he misevaluated the position, thinking that White had the ability to pick up the odd pawns either on the king side or queen side, and he would eventually win. But all the computer analysis I have been able to do on it shows it a dead draw. Anyway, those are the two games I wanted to show you. This was Roussea Gambit. This first game was a very quick win by White. He took advantage of the light squares. The second game, which was the only game I could find with master play, black played very well. He took advantage of the mistakes White made. White should have won this game easily. He made an error in judgment on the 13th move. Back here after a takes b6, he decided to open the center with d4 instead of playing the stronger move, knight to h4. So if you should run across this game and this opening in your games, just remember that White should take advantage of the light square weaknesses in black's position. He has a strong bishop, strong knight, and I hope you've enjoyed the game and hope to have some more games for you in the future, and thank you very much.